What up, rap leaders? Welcome back to my channel. We are on Dennis Street. This is Dennis Street in Campbellville. And of course, we just came through Prashad Nagar. I showed you on, and I want to show you what's happened since the last time we were here on Dennis Street. This is an important road in Georgetown. The reason why I'm back in this neck of the woods is because it holds so much potential and because it has so much promise, and I want to show you what has happened to it since the last time you were here. So let me flip the camera around and show you what's happening here on Dennis Street in Campbellville. So guys, that's Dennis Street looking east towards Turkine and UG and so on. So very busy intersection now because, of course, Conversation Tree Road is now connected. It's now connected to Dennis Street. There was a time in the past when Conversation Tree Road was not connected to Dennis Street. This canal actually ran straight across and there was no bridge. Right, these bridges are new. These bridges that now connect Dennis Street to Conversation Tree Road, those bridges are new. This is traffic heading east. Now, Dennis Street is a very important corridor because it actually runs parallel to the East Coast roads, right? It runs parallel to railway embankment, it runs parallel to Rupert Craig Highway and so on. So Dennis Street is an alternative to taking the East Coast roads into Georgetown. And this street, now you can see, they are building some retaining walls, right? These are retaining walls, which means they're going to build wider roads, continuation of Conversation Tree Road into Section K Campbellville and into that neighborhood, which is Lamaha Gardens. So they're widening these streets passing through Lamaha Gardens, or between Lamaha Gardens and Section K Campbellville. So we're going to come back eventually and see how the progress on widening these streets goes, right? Because it's about 6 months, maybe a year since the last time we were here. But I wanted to pay attention today to Dennis Street. So Dennis Street was under this construction widening for at least, let's say, 3 years, maybe the last 3 years. And what they were doing is building these retaining walls, which is new and good. But for a long time, this street was not paved. If you wanted to get from, say, that UG Road, Dennis Street, passing behind UG Road into the city, you couldn't use this road because it was a dirt road that was torn up. So this is a major improvement. It's a pity they didn't make it into a 4-lane road. It's just 1 lane heading west and 1 lane heading east. It crosses Sheriff Street at the intersection ahead, and then becomes, I think, at Middleton Street it becomes Lamaha Street. So Dennis Street turns into Lamaha Street. And so by orientation you can see that this street is a corridor into the city center. If it becomes Lamaha Street, it means you can get all the way down to Main Street and High Street and Urquhart Street if you just keep going on Dennis Street west. So it's an important corridor. And that is why the last time I talked about this on my walk on Dennis Street, I pointed out that this would be an important route to build a railway line. And the reason is because this is a one straight road that goes all the way to Ogle, right? So where we are right now, we're in Campbellville, but if you headed east along this reserve, which becomes Dennis Street, you know, it's been turned into Dennis. I remember years ago when I actually attended the University of Guyana, Dennis Street was just a pile of dirt, right? It was a dam that stretched for about 3 miles. Now, of course, it is a paved road, but it's straight all the way to, it's a straight road now from Turkine, behind UG, and beyond, right? From Cummings Lodge, say, all the way to Urquhart Street to downtown Georgetown to Lamaha Street. And because of this straight right of way that already exists, it is the appropriate route for a train, a light rail line, a train line that connects all these neighborhoods into the city. And what that does is it makes mass transit a preferred option to get into the city. So instead of dealing with all of the traffic jam, right, the city now depends on road traffic to get into. Let's say you lived on the East Coast and you wanted to get into to your work in Georgetown, in the city center, you need to take the road. You need to either be in a car or a minibus or a motorcycle or a bicycle. You needed to do that just to get into. This is a Ford Raptor. It's wider than the parking spaces. So for the guys who are buying the popular Ford F-150 Raptor, these American vehicles are not really built for the narrow streets of Georgetown. Even these trucks, these Japanese trucks, are narrower than your Chevy and Ford pickups, which are American vehicles made for American wide roads. But yes, guys, as I was saying, this is an apt and an appropriate. This guy is breaking the law again. That's what happens all the time in Guyana. There's no way of knowing if he's a policeman because they do it as well as the ordinary citizens. Guyanese are now some of the worst drivers in the world, which of course underscores why I don't drive in Guyana. Some new construction going on here. This is Campbellville, of course. We're gonna have to explore some of the new developments in Campbellville in a future video, but this is what is happening here in Campbellville. So Dennis Street is an appropriate route for a train line because it runs straight from Ogle all the way to downtown Georgetown. And if you build a light rail on this route, it would take a lot of traffic off of the roads. It would decongest. It's one of the ways to decongest the roads, because a lot of people would choose to take a nice, clean, cheap, and efficient light railway service, a train, into the city rather than battle with traffic in Georgetown. That's Sheriff Street. That's the traffic waiting to cross on Sheriff Street. And that's the traffic policeman directing traffic here on Sheriff Street to this intersection. So that's Sheriff Street looking south. That's Dennis Street looking east, where we've just come from. And this is Sheriff Street looking north. And like I said, some of the tallest, or one of the tallest buildings, residential buildings, is here in Campbellville, but they're building other tall residential buildings along Sheriff Street in Campbellville. We're gonna take a look at some of those buildings in future videos. So let's continue along Dennis Street. So the last time we were here, they still hadn't put a surface on this road. Now they have resurfaced the road, they've made it wider, but they haven't solved all of the problems. The shoulder of this road, for example, has now become a place to park damaged vehicles. And I just pointed out on the other side, this parking lane is narrower than some of the vehicles that park here, like the Ford F-150 Raptor. So this is what's happening. That's a damaged vehicle. Now the last time we were here, they had built this retaining wall, right? This is a retaining wall. It seems to be buckling, it's be bending out, right? That's a retaining wall. They've just put some boulders, I think, on the other side to make sure that it doesn't collapse. But the retaining wall is under some pressure, it seems, and buckling, falling outwards into the canal. On the other side, I think that is Drury Lane. The road is called Drury Lane. It's in Campbellville. Sankar Auto Works. A big building is Sankar Auto Works. This is Dennis Street, and we're heading west. We're heading towards Middleton Street, which is the next intersection, and then Dennis Street becomes Lamaha Street. And we want to see what has happened to Lamaha Street since the last time we were here, because this widening project has been completed. The last time we were here, they hadn't yet put the lines, the road markings on, but now they have, and the road is actually now fully used by vehicles traveling into and out of Georgetown. Dennis Street, that is. But this is what is happening here on Dennis Street in Campbellville. All right, that's Section K. Section K, Campbellville, one of the residential neighborhoods in the city. Some new construction going on here along Dennis Street in Campbellville. And on the other side, of course, that becomes Kitty. That is on the other side of Lamaha Street, north of Lamaha Street. That neighborhood becomes Kitty. There was a new building, a new tall residential building, that one, that's being constructed on Middleton Street in Kitty. Last time I was there, it was still under construction, hadn't yet been completed. Probably will take a look at it again the next time I'm in this neck of the woods and looking at buildings. But that building is a residential building that's being built on Middleton Street, which is the next intersection. So yes, guys, my point about Dennis Street is that it's an important corridor that runs parallel with the coast, and therefore an appropriate line for light rail, like a train. And what I would do is yes, guys, as I said, what I would do is I would put an elevated line, an elevated train line, put it high up in the air and run it along this canal. Right, so it would be elevated above this canal with the pillars reaching down to the bottom of the canal, and having train stations, platforms all along Dennis Street from Ogle to downtown Georgetown. It would loop along the waterfront, that is Water Street elevated line, going all the way to the back road, that is Mandela Avenue, and then turn east again and go all through South Ramvelle Gardens, South Ramvelle Park, and Roxanne Burnham Gardens, and so on, all the way to Ogle again. Turn north at Ogle and then loop back. Right. It would loop back around. So this is Middleton Street. And now Dennis Street becomes Lamaha Street. So that's Middleton Street looking south. This intersection is Dennis Street and Middleton Street. But on the other side of this intersection, where I'm standing, is now Lamaha Street. And we're heading now on, still heading west, now heading on Lamaha Street towards Lisingian Road, where we're going to end this video. So this is what has happened since the last time we were here. They've actually now put some paint, black, yellow and white paint onto this edge of the retaining wall, but there actually should be a guardrail, right? There should be a guardrail on this street, because a guardrail is intended to protect traffic from ending up in the canal in this now storm drain. Problem with that is, of course, if you flip upside down, if you get in an accident and your car ends up upside down in this narrow canal, it's likely that the occupants will drown before they get rescued. And as I was saying in the previous video, it's attention to detail. Details like this that I point out. And when I point it out, people say I'm complaining and I mean it's political. It's not political, it's a matter of safety, right? And it's a matter of attention to detail. And the people who are building these infrastructures should be paying attention to detail. That's what they get paid for, right? To build safe infrastructure for the country. So I don't know how long it will take, but there needs to be a guardrail all along this canal from Dennis Street to Lamaha Street. At Lamaha Street, I think it becomes a sidewalk. Yeah, there's a sidewalk separating the road from the canal, but they still need to put a guardrail in all along this canal, for the obvious reason that if an accident causes a vehicle to end up in this canal upside down, then the occupants will drown. And that's simple reasoning. But this is Lamaha Street. The thing that's missing, of course, is the guardrail, but what they did put in is the road markings. That's new, because I think the last time we were here in this neighborhood, they had completed the road, but they hadn't put in the road markings yet. And so that's what's great. This is the Blue Martini. I guess it's a local karaoke bar and lounge and restaurants and so on in this neighborhood. Of course, on the other side, that is south of where we are walking, that's now called Newtown. And the other side, this is Kitty. That is north of where we are. That's Kitty. All right, we're now on Lamaha Street. Dennis Street became Lamaha Street. The name of Dennis Street changes to Lamaha Street once you cross over Middleton Street. And the widening of Dennis Street is now the widening of Lamaha Street, and that was what was completed, I think, a couple of years ago now. They've completed, it's more than a year since they've completed the widening here of Lamaha Street. But like I said, still unsafe because there's no guardrail. Even if you're parking, I think there's recently some incidents in Georgetown where drivers who were parking along Crowell Street ended up in the canal that separates Crowell Street and South Road. And you can see how easily that could happen here, because if you're parking and you made a mistake, you could easily end up in this canal besides Lamaha Street. But such is the nature of infrastructure development in Guyana. Somebody cut the tree down, but of course, they just abandoned it. It now straddles and clutters the canal. The storm drain here on, right, this tree, somebody cut it down, but they didn't take care to make sure that it didn't end up in the drain. So now, of course, you have a flooding problem because nobody cares. They build these new drains, but nobody cares to keep them clean and open. And again, guys, that's not complaining. That's simply pointing out some obvious lack of attention to detail. We build infrastructure, but we don't maintain it in Guyana. And that is the mentality that has to change. That's what will take us from a third world developing country into a second world or a comparable development to the first world. That is, it's a mindset that has to change. Now that's the park here in Lamaha Street. That's Lamaha Street Park. When we started out, that's the train line road that was converted into the train line route that was converted into a road. Now that's where the old railway ran along Lamaha Street. And that railway is now being converted into a park. So you can see this park was the old railway route. And I contend that what I've been talking about, a train line that runs all the way from Ogle to downtown Georgetown, then loops back to Ogle via the back road or Mandela Avenue. That line would follow the old train line route, which actually ended up at High Street, right? The old train station at High Street, which you've also seen in previous videos. But that's it, guys. That's what's happening here. This is the new widening of Lamaha Street and Dennis Street. We're approaching the intersection with Vlissingen Road, where that widening project ended. However, I'm hoping that this is not the end of this development, and I'm hoping that after the election cycle is over, whoever is elected leaders of government will pay attention to some of this detail and move the country forward beyond what I contend is mediocre infrastructure and bring us into the 21st century, because we can do a whole lot better with the kind of money that we're bringing in now. Like I said, in 2023, Guyana's GDP per capita was 23,000 US dollars per person. In 2025, it's actually closer to 30,000. Right? For this year, GDP per capita in Guyana is closer to 30,000 US dollars per person. And I'm going to prove that to you in a future video when I do a review of Guyana's GDP per capita. Someone requested. But here we are back at Vlissingen Road. Right, this is Vlissingen Road in Georgetown. And this is the intersection with Vlissingen and Lamaha Street. Lamaha Street in Vlissingen Road. Right, that's back at the direction where we've come from. Right, that's Lamaha Street, looking back east. This is Vlissingen Road. Lamaha Street continues, of course. That's Vlissingen Road. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Let people know what's happening in the fastest growing country in the world, Guyana. Later!